Welcome back. We are breaking down the top 10 rookie wide receivers for the 2023 NFL Draft. Broke down the running backs already. You can check that out. Broke down the quarterbacks already, top 5 of those. Today, we're going to be digging into the wide receiver class. A lot of small, shifty slot receivers, a lot of big guys that should be slot receivers. So, should be a fun video. If you guys enjoyed at any point, you know what to do. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. Comment down below who we have too high, who we have too low, and any of your thoughts, and we'll be happy to engage with you down there. So, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And yeah, you guys would have already saw the quarterbacks and the running back position. But if you know FSC, you know our love for wide receivers. And a couple of these guys, especially at the top, are guys that project favorably towards contributing for your dynasty roster. So I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. Of course, if you guys enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below. But with that being said, let's hit the intro.
All right, so you guys should be able to see our consensus ranks. Mine are on the right. Danny's are on the left there on the screen right now. You can see we have them, kind of tier-based as well. The first guy that we're going to get into is Jaxon Smith-Njigba, wide receiver from Ohio State. It's pretty simple. You guys, if you've been following the draft process, you know that JSN is probably the consensus wide receiver one for most people. He's a great route runner. He won an above average rate per Matt Harmon's reception perception on 7 of his 10 routes, posting an 86th percentile mark against man, 62nd percentile win rate against zone, 97th in the small sample against press coverage. He has an excellent profile. He produced at a high level last year in 2021 with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson on the field. His yards per team pass attempt as a true sophomore with those guys ranked second in the class, just behind Josh Downs in that Ohio State offense. So very, very strong analytics profile. A lot of bros really like him. And he's very strong after the catch as well. If you get him in space over the middle of the field, watch him work. He avoided a tackle on 20% of his total receptions, and he ranked second in this class with 8.3 yards after catch per reception. So a lot of good pros to like about JSN. He also has good hands. He's not going to blow you away with like spectacular catches, but a 90% contested catch rate in 2021 is the best in this draft class. And he also does the little things well, right? He's smart, he's tough, he's physical, he knows where to be against zone coverage. He comes back to the ball to create throwing lanes for his quarterback. He's just a good football player. And he also tested a little better than we expected as well. 4.5, 240 at his pro day, 35-inch vertical, 10.5 broad jump at the combine, 6 foot, 196 pounds. So he has good size. And obviously the elite 3-cone, the elite short shuttle numbers that he posted give us confidence that he's going to be able to win in short areas at the NFL level as he did at such a high level in college. So those are the main pros for JSN. I'll let you give your thoughts, and then we'll talk about some of the concerns with him. He does have a tail of the tape on the channel right now, so if you want a more in-depth look, we're kind of just going to breeze over him, Addison, and QJ just because they already have full videos about them.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously, the pros are his ability to command targets on that Ohio State team with 2 future first-round picks with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave last year. You saw the dominant 2021 season that Jaxon Smith-Njigba was able to have. We expected that 2022 season, maybe he plays outside more, maybe he builds off of that season. Obviously, dealt with a lot of injuries. So the biggest con you're going to get into in a second is what exactly is ability to play outside, since we don't have the sample size for it. But if you're talking about a day one slot NFL wide receiver, I wouldn't be shocked if this is a guy who can command, 130 targets as a rookie.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to compare his like reception perception numbers, for example, versus somebody like Jordan Addison or some of these other guys that were like true alphas on their team, because he did play mostly in the slot. So he's going to have an easier time working against number 3 corners, especially that press coverage metric, potentially even safeties or linebackers that he gets matched up on at times. His downfield ability is a little bit in question for me because he wasn't really asked to like go line up outside and run a downfield route very often. If he was downfield, it was usually like a wheel route against a linebacker, a safety, or something like that. And his downfield numbers are quite inflated as a result of that. So I think he can win on the outside in the NFL. He has the skill set, the agility, the speed, the size to be able to do that. But I think he would benefit, at least as a rookie, from playing primarily in the slot, similar to what we saw from, your Dallas Cowboys, how they deployed CeeDee Lamb his rookie season. Then he eventually developed into a more complete outside wide receiver. He does not have elite speed, too, especially on film. You can see he's not like the fastest guy in the world, but it is adequate for the role that he's going to play. And like you said, he missed most of his junior year due to a hamstring injury, whether that was like an invasive injury or not, or if he was protecting his draft stock. It's also possible he was just sitting out because he didn't want to fall further in the NFL draft. He does expect to go as the first wide receiver off the board, he's currently the favorite to be like, first wide receiver minus like 400 right now per FanDuel Sportsbook. As far as rookie draft value, he's the consensus 104, but we wouldn't take him over any of those top quarterbacks. My 105 in my rankings right now. If you wanted to take any, Gibbs over him or Addison over him, I wouldn't blame you. But I think primarily he's going to be off the board by 105 in most drafts because, like I said, the Dynasty community is pretty sold that this guy is the wide receiver one. He is now my wide receiver one. At first, Jordan Addison was, but once we got some more information about Addison, he comes in lighter at the combine, doesn't test as well as we thought he was going to. The reception perception numbers not as good. There's concerns with his ability to win against press coverage. We can transition right into Jordan Addison right now, who is our wide receiver too.
Well, I quickly wanted to mention with JSN, similar case with me, right? I have been battling this for the last couple of weeks, but I did make the move, like you kind of mentioned you did as well. The numbers, the new metrics that would come out, obviously reception perception, how he's regarded within the league, and ultimately the biggest decider for me too was just the Dynasty market value for a guy like JSN. Like his value on the market, on the macro market, keep trade cut, any other, rankings list you'll find, we'll have this guy as the clear cut in a way wide receiver one in the class. Now, I don't prescribe to that theory, but because that there's such a divide between him and the other wide receivers, I do think you have to value him as the wide receiver one, just based off the projectable trade value post-draft.
Yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle for Jordan Addison to overtake him as wide receiver one. He would have to have like, a Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson caliber rookie season relative to like a Treylon Burks rookie season for JSN, for Jordan Addison to actually leapfrog him in the minds of most Dynasty players. So Jordan Addison, pros are pretty simple. He's a great route runner. He can win at all three levels of the field, especially. Steve Smith, when he broke him down, said that his ability to win on deep routes and subtly get behind defenders and win with like deceptive athleticism, because he didn't run very fast, right? He ran 4.49 at the combine, but the reason he's able to win downfield, especially as a member of USC when he was working primarily on the outside, is very, very, translatable to the NFL, because that's how a guy like Chris Olave won at the NFL level and at the college level. He has fantastic hands, great ability to snag the ball out of the air, win outside of his frame. When he was a member of Pitt, he had very little he had a lot of drops, but then he corrected that coming into USC, just 2 drops this year, and also won on contested catches a lot at Pitt as well. I'll let you get into some of the other pros with Jordan Addison. There's a lot of good to like about him, and then there's obviously a couple cons that are holding him back right now.
Yeah, you pretty much covered like the main pros. You think this smooth outside wide receiver, you could play the Z role for you. He's a technician by any means. We mentioned JSN's ability to run routes. Jordan Addison's right up there with him. And when it comes to that type of wide receiver, you would think, oh, maybe he's a softer type of wide receiver because, he's 6'1", he's a wiry guy, he's a route runner. Like, can he make catches over the middle? And that's one of the biggest takeaways you find is, doesn't matter if the ball's at near his frame, he's going, he's attacking it, he's getting his hands on it, and he's tough when it comes to physical contact. So when it comes to Jordan Addison, we're talking about a guy that can contribute on the outside, can play slot if you need him to, has that versatility, can affect all 3 levels of the field. And realistically, I don't care about his frame with how tough he plays, like I kind of said.
Yeah, he's one of these guys that was always going to be a guy that suffered once we got him under the microscope, because when he's on the field playing football games, he looks like the best receiver in this class, the best receiver in the country. It's when you get to the nitty gritty, and we can just go right into the cons, the fact that he is 6 foot, 173 pounds or 175 pounds, whatever he ends up weighing in at. He can add a little bit to his frame. I think he's got room to get up to like 180, 185 if he needed to at the NFL level. But for the most part, that's going to be a knock on him. I see a guy very similar to like Brandon Cooks, who's just a natural gifted football player. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he knows how to win at all 3 levels of the field. He has great hands. He can beat press coverage once he develops that, release package a little bit more in the NFL. His downfield ability is quite good. His ball tracking, his body control is something that I don't think you can really teach. I think Jordan Addison just innately has that like my ball mentality in the air. And I think that's one of the things that he has over JSN, is that JSN is not a very good downfield wide receiver against number 1 corners on the outside. And Jordan Addison played in the slot at Pitt, played on the outside at USC, has experience working as like a designed, bubble screen type of guy at USC is how Lincoln Riley used him. And then also downfield. And then at Pitt, he was the possession receiver, got all the targets over the middle. So he can pretty much do anything that you want. We saw that in his Biletnikoff season at Pitt and also this season at USC. He can pretty much play any role that he wants in the NFL.
It just goes to show you the regarding of JSN as well. The fact that the Biletnikoff winning Kenny Pickett made 1st round pick wide receiver is not the top overall wide receiver in this draft. There's a lot of talent at this top 2 between Jordan Addison and with JSN. We expect both to get the first round capital, and I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, we kind of mentioned it with JSN in the Amon-Ra, CeeDee Lamb type of role. You mentioned a comp with Brandon Cooks, but like we said, maybe a Devontae Smith level ascension where year 1, he's a good 800, 900-yard wide receiver. Maybe he lands, for example, in a team that doesn't have a quarterback right now, gets one next year, and he all of a sudden takes off into this 1,200-yard wide receiver by year 2. I think the Devontae Smith type of route, both kind of possess those similar traits where you look at them and you say, yeah, they're a route running technician. They can get open at will. But then once the ball's in the air, once they're able to attack it out of their frame, they are absolute tough bastards. So Jordan Addison, Devontae Smith both kind of have that. And we've seen Devontae Smith develop into a top 12, top 15 overall dynasty wide receiver within 2 years.
Yeah, I think Smith was a better prospect coming in, had more production, and was a better route runner, especially. But I mean, Addison has the ability to develop into that, and I also think Addison could have like a Calvin Ridley career trajectory where he goes to a team with a stabilized number 1 like Buffalo, who he grew up idolizing Stephon Diggs as a Maryland native. I could definitely see him going to the Buffalo Bills, working alongside Stephon Diggs in year 1, year 2, and then maybe by year 3, Diggs is a little bit older and starting to fall off a little bit, and then Jordan Addison takes over as the number 1 in that Buffalo Bills offense. So that would be, I think, the best landing spot for him. And it's definitely very possible that's about the range of the draft that he goes to. So let's get on to wide receiver 3 right now. He is your wide receiver 3, I believe. He's a little bit ahead for you. I have a different guy as my wide receiver 3. So I'll let you make the case here for Quentin Johnston, wide receiver from TCU.
Yeah, and quickly put with Jordan Addison, we'd feel comfortable taking him in that 105 to 107 range. Just quick reference. I know the rookie drafts are coming up for you guys, but with Quentin Johnston, right? This is the type of wide receiver that the entire dynasty community, if they hit, is going to be valued extremely high. He's got that big frame. He's got that big athleticism profile. He is like, if you were to paint a picture of a prospect wide receiver in this draft, it would be Quentin Johnston in terms of what you see aesthetically. He looks like a wide receiver 1. The problem with Quentin Johnston is he may be big, but God, sometimes he does not play to that frame. For a guy with that amount of size, why is he not coming up with the contested catches like a guy like Josh Downs? Josh Downs is a 5'9", 171-yard wide or 170-pound wide receiver. Why is Quentin Johnston struggling to come down with those catches? So the pros are like, this is a really good dynamic player. Get him in space, get the ball in his hands. Saw it against my Michigan Wolverines. He took a couple drags absolutely to the house in that game. If he's developed in the right way with those athletic gifts, with that frame, he could be really good. The problem that I have is the polish just isn't there. And every report we're hearing right now from the NFL kind of makes it feel like, don't come to the NFL draft. Don't come to the NFL draft because you're probably not going to go in the first round, is the report that came out about Quentin Johnston. I'm just worried about where exactly he goes in the draft. Again, as long as he gets, relative top 40 capital, he's not going to move anywhere in my rankings. But if the NFL is kind of souring on him, if the guy doesn't fully know how to be a professional wide receiver from day 1, I'm kind of worried that it could be a Treylon Burks level development where year 1, yes, you see this natural playmaker, get the ball in his hands, let him create after the catch. This guy's an absolute mammoth in the open field. But the problem is it doesn't translate to a ton of volume year 1 because he still has to learn the nuances of the position. So I really like him still. I like him at the back end of the first round area. I'm willing to take the plunge on him because of the ultimate upside there. But undeniably, the floor is lower than the next 2 guys you're going to bring up.
Yeah, I mean, if his underlying metrics are not good after his rookie year and he has a slow development curve, which is definitely very possible given his skill set and the type of player that he is, it's possible that we have like a face planter situation, right? Yeah. And the guy, loses a lot of ADP. My comp for him is like a more raw version of Brandon Ayuk, because I think one thing that I did like about Quentin Johnston's game a lot is that I think he's very good one-on-one against like man coverage. And I think he actually showed a little bit more nuance than I was expecting. He also, height, weight, speed kind of guy, really good after the catch. Not even just good. He has the highest 110 after the catch grade. I've only given 4 110s, I believe. And Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, and Treylon Burks were the other 3. So we're talking about a guy that's just excellent after the catch, which is where the kind of Ayuk comparison comes in. But Ayuk was much better at catching balls outside of his frame. He had much more reliable hands, not only just like pure drops, but also, like you said, doesn't play to his size. So that's the concern with QJ, and it could be his Achilles heel and the reason he doesn't work out in the NFL, because, the separation, the contested catch situations come up more often in the NFL than they do in college. He had a ton of, design work, a ton of wide open looks and downfield routes in college. And that's just not going to happen very often in the NFL. And it could be a concern for QJ. So for me, I'm more so of the belief that I'm going to let my league mates take the risk on him, because I don't think, even though I think he could hit, I think his ceiling is still a wide receiver 2 in the NFL. I don't think he's going to become, DK Metcalf or Mike Evans or somebody like that. I think he's more in line to be like George Pickens, Michael Gallup, somebody like that at the next level, because I do think that there's holes in his intermediate route tree, to the point that a team is going to want to use him either on design touches, take advantage of his yards after catch ability, or get downfield and use your size if he can develop that part of his game.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think he's got like at least a low end type of wide receiver 1 ceiling, just because of the athletic gifts and the size that he brings. But like I kind of mentioned too, the volatility would be the biggest question mark. Like if you're a rebuilding team and you have a ton of picks like that, maybe you take the swing on him. Whereas like if you're a contender, you want a Zay Flowers or a Josh Downs type, like we'll get into the second, where you just kind of need a wide receiver 3/flex play. That's probably you're gonna be your route. But like I said, if you've stockpiled a bunch of picks, let's say you have, the 102, the 104, the 107, the 109 this year, and like 2024 first round picks, and you want to take Quentin Johnston with the 109, all for it there. Because if he does pay off, the risk reward factor of, oh, I spent the 109 on him and he's not looking great after his rookie year, it's like a Treylon Burks situation. Whereas if it does hit 109, he has a 900-yard, 7-touchdown rookie year, and he's the dynasty wide receiver 13, then, you're going to get that big payoff at the 109 spot in a relatively weaker draft in this late portion of the first, early second, because the prime honey spots of this draft are within the top 8 and are within the, mid-second type of area. So that late first, early second area is kind of just a big jumble, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's kind of, I think I'm like off consensus on him a little bit, because the consensus views him as a boomer bust prospect, where I think his floor is a little higher than people think and his ceiling is a little lower than people think. So I'm a little bit off on my evaluation, I think, than where the market is, which makes me think I would just rather somebody buy into the huge ceiling that they see possible and not worry about the floor. And me, I don't think the huge ceiling is as possible as people think. So that's kind of where we're at with QJ. Again, the 1-2 turn area is where I value him. A lot of people are going to take him off the board, 108, 109, 110. That type of spot area for me. 110, 111 is more so where I'm comfortable with him taking that risk. But we can move on to the next receiver here, which is Zay Flowers, wide receiver from Boston College, who I have as my wide receiver 3. And the reason is because despite his smaller size at 5'9", 182 pounds, he ran a full route tree. He ran short, intermediate, deep. And especially on the deep routes, you saw him win at a very high level, 74th percentile against man coverage and press coverage, 59th percentile against zone per reception perception. He's a fluid mover as well. People are going crazy comparing this guy to Antonio Brown, which is absolutely absurd, because he's like the best sub 6 foot wide receiver to ever play football. But the way that he moves in and out of his breaks and glides when he has the ball after the catch, he's nearly unguardable against press coverage too. That's where the comparison comes from. I don't agree with it, because Antonio Brown is like a future Hall of Famer, but I do think that's where people are seeing that. His yards after catch game is also among the best in the class. He avoided a tackle on 19% of his receptions. 46% of his total yards came after the catch as well. Quarterback play was horrible at Boston College, and he had to do pretty much everything himself. And a lot of the times he was making yards after catch plays out of poorly placed balls, which is hard to do because you have to like then turn up field and make somebody miss. His size dictates that some teams might view him as a slot receiver. But like I said, he worked on the outside, worked downfield like 70% of the time. And it affected how the offense behaved, because he was able to stretch the defense, even though the quarterbacks were absolutely zero threat to do anything for Boston College. So he absolutely can do both. I would much rather have a small receiver like Zay Flowers work downfield in college and then play slot in the NFL than have a guy who works exclusively in the slot in the NFL and we have to project his downfield ability. Whereas, I know Zay Flowers can do the downfield part, which is the more difficult part. So if he had to do both in the NFL, I think it's easier to develop that short skill set. And I think he's a great athlete too. He runs with urgency. He plays at one speed. He has a great change of direction as well when you watch him run in and out of breaks. And he's just excellent. When you watch him on film, he's a good player. And he ran a 4.42 at the combine, posted an 8.28 RAS score, despite having, very poor size, according to the database there. He's tough as nails. Steve Smith Sr. loves him from Underdog Fantasy there because the nuts range of outcomes is that he could become a lot like Steve Smith, right? 5'9", 180-pound, true outside X receiver. And he wins with toughness. He wins with athleticism, and he wins with elusiveness. And I think that's what's appealing about Zay Flowers for me.
Yeah, no, you mentioned all the good things about Zay Flowers. Obviously, this elite quickness type of guy, in and out of breaks, get the ball in his hands. It's just so much fun to watch how he kind of operates that middle of the field, being able to, take whatever to the house, take whatever from a yak standpoint, in terms of expectations. So when it comes to Zay Flowers, I just quickly wanted to mention you did say that his profile does have some warts. The reference there is that after his sophomore season, everybody was like, oh my God, he had 56 receptions, 892 yards, 9 touchdowns. I remember going into the 2021 year, everybody's like, yo, this could end up being one of the best receivers coming out in 2022. He was going to be up there with, your Chris Olave's, Garrett Wilson's, guys like that to go in the first round. But then he had that down season, right? 44 receptions, 746 yards, 5 touchdowns. So that's the only really wrinkle. I would need to see like what exactly was the variable that caused that slight downtick of a year in 2021 between his 2020 and his 2022 production. But regardless, we have this extra year of information where he did bounce back. He looks absolutely the part. You mentioned some of the comps. You saw Antonio Brown. I've seen somebody compare him to Stephon Diggs, right? This is going to be a receiver that gets taken most likely within the first 20 to 25 picks of the NFL draft. And like you kind of said, maybe he lands beside, a bigger type of wide receiver to take some of the size attention away from him. And he could be this, ultra elusive player in the open field. Like, I think I love my Cowboys. I would love to have Zay Flowers on that team. You have CeeDee Lamb as that true number one wide receiver. You have a couple vet wide receivers with Gallup and Cooks. One of them is probably going to be gone after the season to learn from. And from there, you're going to have insulation and a very, very good offense. So you're going to get into some of the other comps as well in terms of what exactly the scheme situation could be for him. But I think if he somehow made it to Dallas, he could be very, very good in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I think any West Coast team would be really good for him. And some of the other warts that are on his profile, too, is that he was a senior coming out. 28% target share and 1,000 yards is good this year. But like you said, down junior season, also dealt with some drops this year. So his hands aren't like totally refined, 10.3% drop percentage. But he was actually really good in contested situations. There's a play that I'm sure a lot of people remember where he's like double covered downfield against NC State. And he like goes over the guy and like rips it off the top of his helmet. So he can definitely give you some of that stuff. I think a West Coast offense, like you said, Dallas would be a good fit. Buffalo would be a good fit. Kansas City obviously would be, mouth-watering. Chicago, Houston, or Indianapolis. My favorite fit for him is actually the team that's been closely connected to him, though, is the New England Patriots. Because, number one, he would actually be the number one target earner on that team. Juju's got size. Devontae Parker's got size on the inside and the outside. You have Zay Flowers working as like the primary Z flanker type of guy in that offense, and he could be a real target hog for Mac Jones. So I actually really like that fit. And I think my comp for him was Christian Kirk. And I think that would be, if you put Christian Kirk last year in the New England Patriots offense, I think they would know how to use a guy like that, which is why I like Zay Flowers going to New England, potentially at 14th overall. I have him a bet on him to be the first wide receiver off the board because I do think that the Patriots might take him at 14. And if JSN doesn't go to Houston, then that would mean that he might be the first receiver off the board, or maybe JSN goes to the Jets or something like that. So I really like Zay Flowers. He is my wide receiver 3. I would make a bet to say that he's also one of the only other receivers that goes in the first round outside of Addison and outside of JSN. So we could probably move on to Josh Downs so we don't go too long on this video. Wide receiver from North Carolina. He has a lot of great traits as well. He has the best hands in the class, dude. His hands are arrogant, man. Guy plays like he's 6'5", 220 at the catch point, like you kind of already alluded to. 3.1% drop percentage was the lowest in the class. So he has, in my opinion, the best hands in the class. Second only to JSN with a 72% contested catch rate at 5'9", 171 pounds. He's also a great short to intermediate route runner, posted 87th percentile and 86th percentile marks against man and press per reception perception. Solid number against zone with 59th percentile there as well. He has good speed, but he's more of like a lateral mover. Ran 4.48 at the combine, posted 89th percentile jumps, 87th percentile agility. So a good athlete overall. And his production is off the charts, man. If this guy was 6 foot, 220 pounds, we would be talking about one of the best prospects in this class for sure. He posted a 38% target share as a true sophomore with Sam Howell. Early declare, 87th percentile breakout age. Another season this past year of an elite, 29% target share. He led the class with, again, an elite number in yards per team pass attempt, 3.49. Only JSN was even remotely close to that vicinity as well. But the cons are very simple. He's probably only a slot receiver in the NFL. He's 5'9", 171 pounds. I highly doubt he'll be dominating on the outside in the NFL. And he also wasn't like explosive after the catch, despite being a good, lateral guy. He's more of like a chain mover slot receiver. He's more of like Tyler Lockett type than he is, a Rondale Moore or an Elijah Moore, a guy that's going to be like breaking tackles and avoiding tackles at a high rate. And because of all of those factors, his dynasty value is somewhat capped a little bit because his dynasty value, I can't anticipate him being like the dynasty wide receiver 7 after his rookie year or after his sophomore year because he's simply capped as a slot receiver. So he's probably going to be like anywhere between wide receiver 15 and 25 at his higher range of outcomes. So for me, that's a difficult part of Josh Downs. I don't think he's ever going to be like this wide receiver 1 in dynasty. So I don't think he's going to bust either. I think he's one of the safer picks in rookie drafts. If you picking, 111 and you just need production as a contender or something like that, and some youth injected into your wide receiver core, I think Josh Downs is the perfect guy to go after. Some of the best fits I think that could be for him is going to a team like Carolina, working alongside Bryce Young would be awesome if he could go land there at 39th overall.
Especially, too, they got some size in that wide receiver core with some of the additions this offseason. Adam Thielen coming in, DJ Chark coming in, already Terrace Marshall there. So they're not really as concerned about taking, a 5'9", 170-pound slot receiver in that instance because they have the size to make up for it.
They're also taking a small quarterback at first overall, too.
Yeah, no, they'll go. They're not gonna be able to ride rides together, but I mean, maybe they get some ice cream or something. You know what I mean? But all jokes aside, yeah, when it comes to Josh Downs, the way I kind of describe him sometimes is he's out when he's up to the plate. You're getting a single or a double, but he doesn't have the power to hit a homer. Is basically how I describe Josh Downs, where he's going to get on base. He's going to be a good contributor to the lineup. He's going to be a great addition to your dynasty team as the wide receiver 3-4 type of dependable. But if you need a guy that's going to be able to just win you the game, or in dynasty reference, basically have a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, elite ceiling in terms of where they can get to on the market, he's not going to be the guy. So overall, you like him in your lineup, but you don't want him to be at the top of the order.
Yeah, exactly. And those were the top 5 wide receivers. Like I said, probably these are the only guys that you'd consider in the first round. The next guys will probably go through a little bit faster because these are more like your mid-second round, maybe early third round type of guys as well.
Just for reference too, for those wondering, obviously the first few guys are more than likely first round picks. When it comes to Josh Downs, he's mocked anywhere in that 30 to type of 50 range. So in terms of his expected capital, expect him to be an early to mid second round pick.
Yeah, exactly. So we can get into our consensus wide receiver 6. Is he consensus wide receiver 6, Marvin Mims? I think it's because you have him quite high. I have him a little bit lower than you, but Marvin Mims from Oklahoma, I'll let you take it away with him. To me, he's kind of almost like a poor man's version of like Zay Flowers and Josh Downs mixed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head there with Marvin Mims. Think your Darnell Mooney type, Tyler Lockett type of mold, where he can play that vertical field stretching type of Z role on a team. He's not going to be, this consistent, chain moving type of slot like a guy like Josh Downs or even Zay Flowers if he plays him inside would. But what he kind of does is he's able to affect that third level of the field. Not to mention from an analytical standpoint, this guy is an absolute analytical darling. Tested out of the wazoo this year. So in terms of his capital, if he lands anywhere on day 2, talking about maybe the mid-second type of area, maybe he goes to a team like Dallas at 58, maybe he goes to a team like Buffalo at 59. I feel like that's that type of range for his draft capital, and he can be that tertiary wide receiver 2-3 on a team. So he's not, this elite upside type of guy. He's not a Quentin Johnston. He's not any of the top 5 guys or top 4 in particular that we kind of mentioned. But like I kind of said with Josh Downs, where if he lands in the right spot, can be a wide receiver 2 for a team, have that vertical speed to be able to affect it in that role. I think he can be, a top 30, top 35 type of dynasty wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, his analytical profile isn't perfect. Like he's smaller, right? He's 5'11", 183 pounds, but he ran in the 4.3s, which is definitely encouraging. So he's a better athlete than a guy like Josh Downs is. Like you said, that was crucial for his ability to impact the third level of the field. I think Matt Harmon compared him to T.Y. Hilton, which I don't think is a bad comparison either. But he also didn't have like the greatest route tree in the intermediate game. He's more of like the small version of QJ from like a route tree perspective, where you can get him on design touches, you can get him downfield, but he's not going to be like winning over the middle of the field on digs and comebacks and things like that. So he's got a little bit of a weird skill set for his size. Typically you see bigger, yak guys like QJ have that type of skill set.
Yeah, and that was the main question mark. That's the main con I was going to get into as well. Is for a guy his size, you would expect, a pure route technician. But the thing with him is a lot of his routes, especially at Oklahoma, were a lot of like option-based type of routes, feeling out your corner, just trying to get open. In the NFL, once we see some more structure, once we see some more technique, I really want to see how he can develop in that role. But it's all going to be telling where this guy goes in the draft. Like if he falls to the end of the third, late fourth type of area, it kind of shows me how the teams feel about his translation to the next level, being a smaller receiver that isn't exactly a technician. However, if he does go on day 2, you're talking about a top 60 overall pick, like I kind of mentioned with some of those contender spots. What that would tell me is they see his natural speed, that 4.38 speed, that shuttle type of speed, and they basically say, you know what? We can teach him the technical side of the game. We just need speed injected into this offense. So if he lands, like I kind of said, I feel like he's the perfect fit for a contender that wants some juice added to the receiver core that can stretch, like you kind of mentioned, that third level of the field.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, the analytical profile, 21 years old, early declare, only a 21% target share is a career high, though, which is kind of a little bit of a concern for him. He was used mostly on short stuff, mostly on deep stuff, not a 3-level threat. So a guy that I'm comfortable, if he goes in round 2 of the NFL draft, I think I'm comfortable spending like a mid to late second round pick on him in rookie drafts, but more so, I think this is going to be a guy that I look for in like the third round, hopefully, because he is expected to go third round of the actual NFL draft. So I would prefer to get him in the third round of my rookie drafts as well. Anything else on Mims, or can we kind of move on to the next guy there?
Nothing really. You kind of mentioned I would feel comfortable there in the mid to late second round area.
Yeah, so we can move on to Jayden Reed, wide receiver from Michigan State. I have him quite a bit higher, I think, than Marvin Mims. I have Mims at 9, I think, or 8, and I have Jayden Reed at 6. So I think Jayden Reed, to me, is a little bit more polished of a prospect. He scored quite well in Matt Harmon's reception perception, and to me, it makes sense when you watch him because he's quick. He has, decisive route running. And he kind of knows where he needs to be. He was excellent at the line versus press coverage, 87th percentile, quick feet, physicality to pop off the line pretty quick. He has really strong hands as well. He flashed some spectacular catches, a few focus drops here and there, 8.3% drop percentage. But to me, his hands were definitely a strength on film. And he kind of ran in the mid 4.4s at the combine as well. And it kind of showcases his speed to be able to affect all 3 levels of the field. But he is primarily going to work in the short to intermediate areas of the field as well. He's a very smart player. He's got that like bulldog mentality, very tough, has the my ball mentality in the air as well. So there, you can piece together a good receiver prospect with Jayden Reed and a good sleeper wide receiver, especially because this is not a guy that people are overly high on. So even though on film he graded out highly for me, I'm not going to have to take this guy probably earlier than the third round of my rookie drafts, because even though he was dynamic as a route runner, he wasn't overly dynamic this year after the catch, which is going to show up in people's models. But if you go back to his junior year, 23% avoided tackles percentage after the catch. It looks like he was dealing with some injuries as a senior, and his profile is objectively bad. So people are going to be off of him for that reason, because he's likely relegated to a slot receiver in the NFL. He's a 5th-year player. He turns 23 basically on draft weekend on Friday night of the draft, which is probably when he's going to hear his name called as well. So he's probably going to get drafted on his birthday, but he's going to be 23 years old, which is definitely not ideal. And he definitely should have come out last year. 25% target share as a true junior. And then he came back for his senior season. Injuries kind of hampered him most of the year. So if he goes in the third round of the actual NFL draft, like I said, this is going to be a guy I end up with a lot of, because he'll probably fall to like early third range of rookie drafts. And once, my wide receiver 6, Jayden Reed, and my wide receiver 5, Josh Downs, there's a big separation between those two guys. And the separation is like 6 to 8 running backs, depending on draft capital, most of the top tight ends, and maybe even Hendon Hooker as well. So there's a big separation for me between like where I have Josh Downs as like my 112, 201 versus where I have Jayden Reed, who's also like just one spot after him at wide receiver, but I expect to draft a lot of running backs, a lot of tight ends between them.
And you kind of mentioned it with Jayden Reed. Like his profile is very weird. So in 2018, we're talking about a freshman season where he played at Western Michigan, of course, but 56 receptions, 797 yards, 8 touchdowns as a true freshman. Had a down season in 2020. Like you kind of mentioned, as a junior, jumped back up, 59 receptions, 1,026 yards. That's a 17.4 yards per reception clip. That shows to me that if he's developed the right way, because obviously, of course, this year was the down year, 11.6 yards per reception, down year in terms of the usage, in terms of the volume. But that 17.4 season with 10 touchdowns, if a team can get that type of Jayden Reed out of him, I have no problems projecting this guy to potentially play a Z type of role. If he gets the draft capital, if he lands at a spot that sees that season, tries to go back in the tape with Jayden Reed and figure out what exactly was going on there and get that full out of him. Like you kind of mentioned, he probably was dealing with some injuries as a senior in 2022, which kind of impacted his usage. Because of course, if you're banged up, your best type of usage is going to be these intermediate type of routes to get you in the flow of the game. Because realistically, if you're banged up, you're not going to be able to stretch the field, stretch the defense like you would if you were fully healthy. So he is a very, very interesting case. Because if you ask an analytics guy, they're going to say they're out, like you kind of mentioned. But if you're able to dig in this profile and kind of love it for what it is, you understand that there's certain ways where this guy can develop into a two wide receiver set type of wide receiver. And if that's the case, like you kind of mentioned, if he gets that type of adequate draft capital, if he's going in the third round of your rookie drafts, I wouldn't be shocked if in the right spot he can be a top 35, top 40 wide receiver. But like we kind of said, this applies to a lot of these guys in this range, because there's a lot of guys in this, 5 to 10 area where they have some things you love about their profile, but also some big warts that we got to digest.
Yeah, it's about what you can kind of explain away. And to me, Jayden Reed's stuff is easier to explain away than some of the guys that we're going to talk about, because he was injured, because, on film, Matt Harmon really likes him. He thinks he compared him to, like, maybe he becomes like Stephon Diggs or Terry McLaurin in the future. Like, he thinks he has a super high ceiling. For me, I see like more like a Jahan Dotson type of ceiling for him. But either way, I think he's an interesting prospect. And when I do the sleeper video, my top 5 sleepers in rookie drafts pre-NFL draft, he absolutely will be in this video, because I do think he's a great sleeper in this class. Number 8 wide receiver we can get into, a lot lower than most people probably have him, is Jalin Hyatt, wide receiver from Tennessee. And this is a pretty open and shut case. I'll let you, start taking it away here.
Yeah, there's not really much else I have to say here other than the fact that if you look at the production, you're going to think that this guy's one of the top 4 wide receivers in this class. 67 receptions, 1,267 yards, 15 touchdowns, playing on a Tennessee offense that was one of the best in the entire country, and actually held the number 1 overall ranking in America for a short period of time there. And you just saw him sometimes when you were watching him where he was like 30, 40 yards down the field. There wasn't a guy within 10 yards of him. And he's just going into like that Alabama game in particular. Obviously, everybody remembers he scored 4 or 5 touchdowns in that game. I remember after that game, everybody in the Dynasty landscape's like, wait, like, is this Jalin Hyatt guy for real? Like, what's going on here, right? But then when you rewatch it, it's like, how many times can Alabama break down in coverage in a single game? And that's kind of the theme of the Tennessee season. We kind of mentioned it in the quarterback video with Hendon Hooker. How many free outside releases with nobody in the vicinity are going to be developed in that pupil scheme in Tennessee? And that's on the inverse for Jalin Hyatt. Like, kudos. You got to give him his respect. He's winning down the field. He's productive. He's getting the production that you want to see. But he's just a one-trick pony right now, man. I want to see him develop that route tree. I want to see him develop as a technician, go through tough catch type of situations. If my only basis of analysis is you being wide open 40 yards down the field with nobody in your area, how can I objectively evaluate how you're going to translate to the next level when those breakdowns in coverage are simply not going to materialize? So when it comes to Jalin Hyatt, he's a guy that's going to be highly regarded in the NFL draft. His projected rank, according to NFL mock draft database, is 38th overall. So in terms of draft capital, in terms of where he should go, he's somebody I would take a shot on just for that. But if he's valued as an early to mid second round pick, I cannot take him up there, because I have so many question marks as to how exactly he's going to earn targets in the next level. Is this going to be a Marquez Valdez-Scantling type of situation where he's going to go high because a team wants him for his speed? Like a Gabe Davis type of situation where a team wants him for his ability to affect that third level? Or is it going to be a situation where he can actually develop into a receiver that can command an adequate amount of targets? It's yet to be seen with Jalin Hyatt. He's a very, very weird case. And someone like you kind of said with Jayden Reed, you can pick away and you can explain away some of the warts. I don't know how to explain Jalin Hyatt's profile.
Yeah, to me, he could be anywhere from Ted Ginn to like Will Fuller at his higher range of outcomes, which is going to have his weeks. I think in best ball formats, he's definitely more interesting for that reason, because he has good hands. I think his hands are pretty good downfield. He's a great ball tracker down the field. He's got great speed, like you said. He's good at winning at the third level of the defense, but I mean, he has virtually no yards after the catch appeal. He doesn't really do much in terms of short area separation, short to intermediate. You're basically using this guy as a downfield vertical stretch threat, which is valuable to an NFL offense, but might not be that valuable for us in fantasy. And like you said, his analytics profile is a little bit of a mixed bag, because he had really no production until this year. And then all of a sudden this year, the scheme's wide open, the quarterback's more experienced, and they just kind of dissected people down the field. And every touchdown that you see of Jalin Hyatt long is pretty much a busted coverage. There's a play against Kentucky where there is literally nobody within 50 yards of the guy on one of his touchdowns. And the same is said for a lot of those Alabama touchdowns and stuff. We're not trying to like completely shit on the guy's profile because he did produce still, but at the same time, like watching the film tells you quite a bit of the story about Jalin Hyatt. He has the tools to become more than just a deep threat. But it's probably going to take him some time in the NFL. And we know dynasty players are a little bit hesitant to give wide receivers time in the NFL. So I'm probably going to let my league mates draft Jalin Hyatt as well. A guy that I think is probably going to be a second round pick, and that's going to make him, an early second, mid second round pick in rookie drafts. And I would rather just draft a running back there or draft a tight end there or whatever the case is.
Yeah, no, I agree. He's kind of a case where if he falls to like the late second, like you kind of mentioned, I like that. That's where I would be fine with it if he gets the adequate draft capital. But early second area, you mentioned it. There's going to be running backs going in on day 2 in that area. There's going to be tight ends, arguably with day 1 capital going in that area. Maybe a Dalton Kincaid falling a little bit. Maybe a Michael Mayer falling a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. We can honestly, while we're talking about Tennessee's offense, we can just talk about the next guy because Cedric Tillman is our wide receiver 9 consensus. I have him like right behind Jalin Hyatt. They're within 10 points in my grading system right now because I think with Cedric Tillman, the interesting thing is that he has a little bit more of a translatable skill set. Even though he wasn't as productive as Jalin Hyatt this past year, he was banged up. I think he has the best hands for anyone in this class not named Josh Downs. Just 5 drops this year. Or 5 drops, in the last 2 years, 72.2% contested catch rate in 2021, which was a top 3 mark in the class. He's one of the only wide receivers on this list that has good size, 6'3", 213 pounds, in a class full of slot receivers and full of 170 pounders. He tested well at the combine as well, 4.54 in the 40, jumping in the 79th percentile as well, posting an RAS score in the 87th percentile. He's an average separator, but he's not a bad separator. So I think a lot of people will see a guy like this in the way he wins and assume he can't separate, but he separates similar to the same conversation we had last year about Drake London, where it's at the catch point, at the top of his routes. He's able to, use his body, use his size, use his frame, and create separation that way and be physical and leave a throwing window that way. But it's not necessarily going to look the same as JSN separation or Jordan Addison separation, Zay Flowers separation. So I think people are going to like that about Cedric Tillman at the next level. The fact that he has size, he's a fantastic blocker. Scouts will love that he has football IQ, zone awareness. Every time you watch him on like a curl route or a dig route, he's working back to the football, attacking the football, which, some of the receivers in this class do not do. And Cedric Tillman, although he's not a dynamic lateral mover, separation will be a little bit trickier for him in the NFL. His role could be that of like, at the higher end range of outcomes, Michael Thomas, but maybe on the median end, like a Corey Davis, securing first downs, job. That's what his job will be in the NFL. He's not going to, break open 70-yard touchdowns on slant routes, but he's going to get you 20-yard chunk plays because he can get open over the middle of the field. His profile is sketchy too. 23 years old, redshirt senior coming out. Really only one productive season in 2021, but he did showcase some ability, some big games against some great schools like Georgia, Alabama. He decimated those guys in 2021. And his breakout age is terrible. He dealt with injuries most of his college career as well. So he's got a lot of warts on his profile, but the film is solid, especially in 2021. He did it against great schools, and he's a good projection to the NFL. And it looks like he's almost locked in for day 2 draft capital. I would say he'd be more likely to go top 50 than he would to slide out at day 2.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's currently listed at 67 here, but with all the buzz we've been hearing this last week, teams really, really like Cedric Tillman. I would be extremely shocked if he wasn't a second round pick. And like you kind of mentioned, like obviously that 2021 year, very, very productive, 1,000 yards. Like what do you have? Like 60 receptions that year. Like he was absolute money when it comes to 2021 season. 2022 comes, obviously the Tennessee offense takes this big flight, and people might look and say, well, what the fuck happened to Cedric Tillman? Well, first of all, he only played in 6 games, but in those 6 games, nearly 70 yards per game, 3 touchdowns in that stretch, playing next to a guy like we just mentioned with Jalin Hyatt, who had nearly 1,300 receiving yards. So
playing hurt too, for what it's worth. When you watch him in 2022, he looks slow, and you can tell that he's hurt based on his 2021 tape.
So this is a big time, analytics versus what we can kind of see from the film when it comes to Cedric Tillman, because the analytics will tell you, like, dude, like he had less than 200 yards in his first 3 years, had that one breakout year, and then he stayed back for his 5th year. It's not an ideal profile, but like you kind of said, sometimes you have to watch the film to find some of that context. And Cedric Tillman, if he had committed to the draft last year, probably would have went in the same range as he's going this year. So just being able to spot that context, understand that this is a good wide receiver, who should have probably came out last year, but then obviously dealt with his injuries this year. You got to find that kind of middle ground between being fully out and understanding the upside in the situation. He, to me, like you kind of mentioned, that Corey Davis type of role, that physical, big, X wide receiver type of role at the next level. If a team needs some size for their wide receiver core, say they have like a very, very small corps, want that true, intermediate type of threat, tough threat in that intermediate area, like I kind of said, he's going to make a ton of sense. So in terms of like the draft, like you kind of said, there's so many teams in that 40 to 60 range that need that archetype of wide receiver to the point where I don't see him falling out. Like a team like Buffalo, for example, like you kind of mentioned, they have Gabe Davis affecting the third level. They have Stephon Diggs as their main target earner. If they got that size wide receiver that can complement the gifts of both of those guys, I think that offense would be taken even to another level.
Yeah, and I think most teams are going to view him as a big slot too, who's going to help out in the run game, who's going to be a guy that they can get possession targets to. And Buffalo has had shifty slot guys for a long time, and a part of the reason why they couldn't run the ball effectively is because they don't have somebody who can block over the middle. And I think Cedric Tillman would be a great fit for them. I think teams like Atlanta and Tennessee, who run the ball a lot, will love a guy like Cedric Tillman as well, and probably also could use a second receiver. So those are probably landing spots that he'll probably end up going to. And especially if he goes to Atlanta or Tennessee, people are not going to like this guy from a fantasy perspective. Those are bad, pass heavy or run heavy offenses. People are going to let this guy fall to like the mid third of rookie drafts, most likely. And I will snatch him up all day in that area. So let's get into the final guy of this video, which is Jonathan Mingo, wide receiver of Ole Miss, who's gotten quite a bit of buzz in recent days, I would say, because Peter Schrager put him at like 29th overall in his most recent mock draft. And I when you watch his film, you can squint and see a good wide receiver for sure. 6'2", 220 pounds, ran a 4.46 at the combine, jumped out the gym. So we have a big, fast, physical wide receiver in a class, like I said, that does not have a lot of size. And he has strong hands. He has a ton of spectacular catches on his film. You'll watch him go up and moss people. You watch him make one-handed catches. I think he also has really good after the catch ability too. He's solid wiggle. He's very strong. Like he's like a running back in the open field. He's really difficult to bring down. 7.3 yards after catch per reception, was top 6 in this class as well. And his role, I think he was misused at Ole Miss because, like I said, I think he's going to be a big slot in the NFL. Ole Miss used him primarily as like an outside field stretcher. And Matt Harmon, basically, you guys can see the chart on the screen. He did not win at a high rate on 9 routes, corner routes, post routes, dig routes, like the downfield type of routes. What he won well at was like out routes, curls, slants, flats, like short routes. And I think that's what would make him good in the slot at the NFL level. He also has received the only perfect run blocking grade I have ever given. This dude is a mauler in the run game, dude. He is extremely effective. It speaks well to his physicality. He's always looking for work too. He's very like, help out his team kind of vibe. And I think NFL teams will really like that about him. It's probably part of the reason he's getting top 50 buzz in the NFL draft. But why the hell didn't this guy produce more, man? Like that's the tough part about his profile. Future UDFA Malik Heath outproduced him this year. And outside of his size, where he's built like a true alpha X wide receiver and he has great athleticism, his production profile is bad. He had fewer than 450 yards each season his first 3 years, couldn't stay on the field, played like 8 or less games. And then this year, he only produced like an 800-yard season in his breakout year, quote unquote, 22.5% target share. So in the video I did last year titled Wide Receivers to Target and Avoid, this is the type of profile you want to avoid, right? A guy that wasn't productive, but is getting elevated because he's a good athlete and he's big. But at the same time, you watch him on film and the framework is there. And it's something that I'm somewhat, conflicted with, because I think if an NFL route running coach got with this guy, they could make him a better route runner. They could make him better at the catch point because he also wasn't that great in contested situations outside of those like spectacular catches. So, I mean, he's going to be interesting because he's going to go in the second round, probably. He's projected, 86th overall. I guarantee he's a second round pick in the NFL draft. And especially a team, like I said, Atlanta and Tennessee, teams that run the ball a lot, they're going to love a run blocking receiver like this. Oh. This dude is a Tennessee Titan at 41 overall if he's on the board. I guarantee he would get picked by Tennessee at 41 overall. And I think part of the projection here is like a Juju Smith-Schuster type, maybe like early career Juju who had more explosiveness more so than now. But I think he's going to be a guy that I'm interested in at like the 2-3 turn of rookie drafts, depending on draft capital. I think if he goes to a decent situation, he could be a guy that is a good late second round, early third round pick.
Yeah, no, absolute tone setter, like you kind of said. He's got all the physical makeup in terms of his natural athleticism, natural gift to play that big slot role. Again, you kind of mentioned it, though. He needs some development. I mean, this is a guy who, as a fourth-year player, had that breakout of 861 yards and 5 touchdowns. Like, are we serious? Even before that, never a year with over 400 receiving yards. Like, there's a risk here because if he wasn't trusted in a volume role in college, what makes us think he's going to have that role in the NFL? And that would be, the ideal way of thinking in most cases. But like you kind of said, he's tricky because you see it in a pan. You see the flashes. You see the upside if developed right. So get him in a system with a really good wide receiver coach that can get that out of him. And maybe he does take that develop in the next level. Although it's rare, we've seen cases where players don't produce in college, get with the right system because they have that natural athletic gift. And then
we've seen Ole Miss receivers do it. We've seen DK Metcalf do it. He didn't produce at all in college, and he dealt with injuries most of his college career as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So interesting case that we're talking about that this guy looks kind of like A.J. Brown from Wish with the #1 Ole Miss uniform. And then we're comparing him from a production standpoint to the other Ole Miss wide receiver. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, he's weird, man. He's difficult projection. A lot of analytics bros are going to be like, I'm out. Someone else draft him. I'm willing to take some shots. I'm not going to take a lot of shots. And if he's available, especially if he's a Tennessee Titan, he'll be in the third round of your rookie drafts. And I'll take shots on him in the third round of my rookie drafts. But if he's like an early second round pick and a good landing spot, I definitely will not be taking many shots at that point in time. So that is the wide receiver rankings. There's a couple guys we didn't talk about. I mean, Tank Dell, good separator, but he's really small. I'd like to see where he gets drafted. And also just, I don't think he has a huge ceiling from like a dynasty perspective, given his size. We also have a guy like Tyler Scott, who's kind of like discount Jalin Hyatt, just like one trick downfield type of wide receiver. There's like a million other guys in this class that are also semi-interesting. I'll let you. Yeah, Rashee Rice had a terrible, reception perception mark, but he can win on contested catches. I don't know. Anybody else you want to mention?
Nothing really in particular. Just wanted to say, like his reception perception profile was one of the worst things you will ever see. I believe he's one of the only wide receivers that I have seen with a first percentile in a category. Like that is remarkably bad.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Terrace Marshall and Jalen Reagor's like rookie season reception perception numbers were that low, but not like when they were coming out of college numbers. Yeah, I think there's a couple other guys too, like Xavier Hutchinson is semi-interesting because PFF really had a high grade on him, but he's like a big slot also, and he also is like a redshirt senior, like 23 years old. Kind of just like not as interesting as some of these other guys that had better film. So draft capital, of course, dictates some stuff. If Xavier Hutchinson's like the 39th overall pick, obviously we'll have to dig into him a little bit more. But for the most part, I think these wide receivers, especially at the top, will probably stay relatively the same. Top 5 guys will be the top 5 guys. Wide receiver landing spots not nearly as important as running backs, quarterbacks, even tight ends sometimes. So that is the wide receiver rankings. A little bit longer of a video, but if you stuck around to the end, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. If this is the first time you're checking us out, we also have a site where you can get all of our rankings. You can get all of our rookie rankings, dynasty rankings by position, age bucket, all that good stuff over on flockfantasy.com. And you also get access to all the bonus content of all your favorite creators that you guys can see on the screen there. And you'll get access to first dibs on dynasty decisions if you use code FSE for 30% off and a 2-day free trial, 6 months free if you sign up annually. We have a number of dynasty decisions submissions in the queue right now. We should probably get some of those videos out to you guys either next week or the week after. So we will definitely cover some of those teams. So with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.